You ever get so tired of your own life that even your own front door feels like a threat? By 11:40 on a Thursday night, Claire Whitmore had become the kind of tired money could not soften. The city still glowed beneath her, all silver windows and slow red taillights. But from the driver's seat of her black Mercedes, it looked less like a skyline and more like a machine that had forgotten how to stop. Her phone lit up again in the cup holder. Another board member. Another message marked urgent. Another polished little emergency from people who only called her fearless when they needed something signed before midnight. Claire stared at the screen until it went dark on its own. Then she looked through the windshield at the private garage gate leading back to her building and did nothing. She did not start the engine. She did not answer the phone. She sat there with one hand resting on the wheel, the other still curled around the key fob, as if motion itself had become too expensive. The garage was clean in the way lonely places often were. Too much polished concrete. Too much silence. Too much room for a person to hear her own thoughts and realize she did not want to go home tonight. Not to the penthouse with the floor-to-ceiling windows and the untouched guest rooms and the kitchen that looked like it belonged in a magazine but never smelled like food. Not to that kind of quiet. She let her head fall back against the seat and closed her eyes for just a second, but the second deepened. Her breathing turned shallow. Her chest tightened, not from danger, but from something worse because it was familiar. Pressure. Emptiness. The old private panic of a woman who could command a room full of executives and still lose to silence once the room was gone. A maintenance cart hummed somewhere across the lower level. Slow wheels. Soft rattle. Then the hum stopped. Isaiah Brooks stepped around the concrete column with a wrench in one hand and a half-empty thermos in the other. He had stayed late fixing a faulty gate arm on the service side of the building next door, and all he wanted now was to catch the last downtown bus, get home to his daughter, and warm up the leftover mac and cheese. She insisted tasted better the second day. But when he passed the black Mercedes idling in a marked resident space, something made him slow down. Maybe it was the stillness. Maybe it was the way the woman inside looked too composed to be all right. Isaiah knew better than to rush up to a stranger's car at night. He also knew what it looked like when someone was trying very hard not to fall apart in public. So he kept his distance. 3 steps back from the driver's side window. Hands visible. Voice low. Ma'am. No response. He tapped gently on the glass with one knuckle. Ma'am, are you okay? Claire opened her eyes and turned fast enough to show she had not been sleeping. Her expression sharpened on instinct first. The expensive kind of self-protection. Then it flickered. Because the man outside her car was not staring. Not judging. Not trying to figure out whether she was rich, drunk, important, difficult, or worth the trouble. He was just standing there in a faded navy work jacket, shoulders squared against the cold, looking at her the way decent people look at rain on the side of the road. Like it mattered, but not like it belonged to them. Claire lowered the window 2 inches. I'm fine, she said automatically. Isaiah nodded once, like he had expected the lie. All right, he said. Then I'll ask a different question. Are you safe to drive? Something in that landed differently. Not because it was dramatic. Because it was careful. Because it offered dignity. Claire looked away toward the garage gate again, then back at the steering wheel beneath her hands. Her fingers were trembling. Just slightly. Enough. I don't want to hear my own house tonight, she said before she could stop herself. The words sat between them in the chilled air, too honest to take back. Isaiah's face did not change much, but something in his eyes softened with recognition. He had heard that kind of sentence before. Sometimes from exhausted nurses waiting at bus stops. Sometimes from fathers in laundromats after midnight. Sometimes, years ago, from himself. He set his thermos down on the concrete beside his boot and leaned just enough to be heard without crowding her. Then don't go there yet, he said quietly. Not if it's louder than where you are now. Claire looked up at him. Then, really looked, and for the first time that night, the silence in front of her did not feel like something closing in. It felt like a door had opened without making a sound. Claire let out a breath that sounded steadier than she felt. It fogged faintly in the cold air slipping through the narrow opening of the car window. For a moment neither of them spoke. The garage held that strange late-night stillness again, but it had changed shape. It was no longer the kind that pressed against her ribs. It was the kind that waited. Isaiah glanced once toward the exit ramp, then back to her. Do you have somebody you can call? He asked. Claire almost laughed at that, not because it was funny, but because it was not. Her phone was full of names. Investors. senior staff, a stylist, a trainer, 2 assistants, a lawyer she paid too much, a mother who only called after headlines, plenty of numbers. Not one person she wanted to hear say, "Are you all right?" in that careful voice people use when they are already calculating how inconvenient your answer might be. "No," she said. This time it was the truth. Isaiah nodded as if truth deserved room. "All right," he said softly. "Then let us keep it simple." He motioned toward the dashboard. "Turn the car off for me first." Claire hesitated, fingers tightening around the wheel. He noticed, but did not rush her. "You do not have to decide your whole night right now," he added. "Just the next minute." That got through. She pressed the button. The engine fell silent. The sudden quiet should have felt worse, but somehow it did not. Isaiah bent, picked up his thermos, and stepped back again, always leaving distance where another man might have tried to take familiarity. "Can you open the door?" he asked. Claire swallowed. "I can." "Then do that." She opened it slowly and stood, one hand still on the frame until the concrete beneath her heels felt solid. Up close, the garage felt colder than it had from inside the car. A draft moved through the lower level, carrying the faint smell of rain from outside and machine oil from somewhere behind the service corridor. Claire wrapped her arms around herself without meaning to. Isaiah noticed that too. He took off his work jacket, not dramatic, not noble, just practical, and held it out. "It is clean," he said. "Mostly." Claire looked at the jacket, then at him. "What if you need it?" "I grew up in Pittsburgh," he said. "I will survive 20 more minutes." The corner of her mouth moved. Barely, but it moved. She slipped the jacket over her shoulders. It was warmer than she expected and smelled faintly of detergent, coffee, and a trace of something human and ordinary. She could not name at first because she had not been around ordinary enough lately to remember it. Maybe drywall dust. Maybe old cedar. Maybe home from somebody else's life. Isaiah took out his phone and checked the time. His face changed for the first time. Not panic. Not even worry exactly. Just a father counting backward. Claire caught it. "You have somewhere to be," she said. "I have a daughter waiting on me to get back before morning feels too early," he replied. Then he added, "She is asleep by now. But kids know when the house is missing somebody." Claire looked down. The sentence found a place in her deeper than she wanted. "I am sorry," she said. Isaiah shook his head once. "Do not be." He glanced toward her car, then toward the open service lane beyond the garage. "You should not be by yourself tonight, and I do not think a hotel is what you mean either." Claire gave a tired exhale. "No, then here is what I can offer." His voice stayed even, free of performance. "I have a small place about 15 minutes from here if traffic is kind. You can sit, drink water, catch your breath, and decide what you want to do when the walls are not echoing at you." Claire stared at him. In her world, offers always came with invisible wiring. A return favor. A story. A weakness to be used later. But nothing in his face reached for anything. He was not trying to know her. He was trying to help her get through an hour she could not carry alone. "You would take a stranger home?" she asked. Isaiah gave a dry little shrug. "Only the ones who look more tired than dangerous." That almost made her smile for real. Almost. Then she looked at the dark windshield of her own car, saw her reflection there, sharp coat, expensive earrings, eyes that looked older than the rest of her face, and felt something unclench with quiet embarrassment. "I do not even know your name," she said. "Isaiah Brooks." "Claire," she said, then corrected herself out of habit. "Claire Whitmore." He did not react to the surname. No widened eyes. No sudden stiffness. No recognition that he was speaking to the woman whose name sat on half the glass towers downtown. He only nodded once, like a name was just a name until a person gave it meaning. "All right, Claire," he said. "Come on." And for reasons she could not explain yet, she followed him. Isaiah's truck was older than Claire expected and cleaner than she deserved to expect. A faded silver Ford with a cracked plastic cup holder, a child's booster seat in the back, and a little paper star taped to the dashboard in purple marker with the words "You got this, Dad" written in a child's uneven hand. He opened the passenger door without flourish and waited for her to get in before walking around to the driver's side. The cab smelled like cinnamon gum, laundry soap, and the ghost of coffee that had long gone cold. No cologne, no leather polish, no curated luxury, just a life that had been used honestly. Claire sat carefully, still wearing his jacket, still feeling a little unreal. She had spent most of her adult life inside vehicles quieter and more expensive than some people's rent, but none of them had ever felt this steady. Isaiah turned the key. The engine answered with a low, rough hum. He checked the mirrors, then pulled out of the garage into the city night, as if he had done exactly this forever, carrying one thing at a time, without making noise about the weight. They drove through downtown first, past restaurants folding in for the night, past late office windows with one or two forgotten lights still burning, past a florist hosing off the sidewalk in front of buckets of wilted stems. Claire leaned her temple lightly against the cool glass and watched the city change block by block. The polished center loosened at the edges. Glass gave way to brick. Valets disappeared. Corner stores stayed awake. Somewhere a neon diner sign buzzed in the dark like it had been working the same shift since 1987. Isaiah did not fill the silence with questions. He only turned the heat up a notch when he noticed her hands were still cold and placed a bottle of water in the cup holder nearest her without looking over. "Drink," he said gently. "It helps more than people think." Claire took the bottle and obeyed before she could remember that she was not used to obeying anyone. The water was cold enough to wake something behind her eyes. She swallowed once, then again. "Thank you," she said. Isaiah nodded. "You are welcome." A few minutes passed. Streetlights slipped across his face in bands of gold and shadow. He looked older in that light than she had first guessed. Late 30s maybe. Maybe early 40s. The kind of face built by weather and responsibility more than age. Strong hands on the wheel. Calm shoulders. Tired around the edges in a way expensive skincare could never touch. Claire looked out the window again. "Your daughter made that?" she asked quietly, glancing toward the paper star on the dash. Isaiah smiled this time, small but real. "Maya made 6 of them. She believes encouragement should be visible." Claire let the word settle. "How old is she?" 8. Going on 35 if you ask her. Loves spelling bees. Hates green beans. Thinks pancakes count as emotional support. Claire made a sound that was almost a laugh. It surprised both of them. Isaiah glanced over just enough to notice, then let the moment stay unhandled. "And she is home alone?" Claire asked after a second, her tone tightening with concern. "No, ma'am. Mrs. Alvarez is downstairs. She keeps an eye out if my shift runs long. In return, I fix whatever her grandsons break and pretend not to notice when she sends food upstairs like I am still growing." There it was again. The ordinary grace of a life with actual people in it. Claire lowered her eyes to the bottle in her hands. "That sounds nice." Isaiah did not answer right away. "It is," he said at last. "It is also loud on Saturdays." Claire looked at him then. "I think I would pay a great deal for loud on Saturdays." He did not smile this time. "I figured." The answer was so plain it nearly hurt. The truck stopped at a red light. Across the intersection, a family came out of a 24-hour pharmacy carrying a sleepy toddler wrapped in a blanket. The father held the door while the mother balanced bags, and the little girl's socked feet kicked gently against her coat. Nothing glamorous. Nothing rare. But Claire watched them like someone studying a language she used to know and had somehow forgotten. "You have not asked what happened," she said. Isaiah kept his eyes on the light. "You look like you needed less explaining and more quiet." Claire stared at him. "Most people ask questions so they can decide what kind of person they are helping. I already know the kind I am trying to be," he said. The light turned green. He drove on. Claire looked down at the label peeling on the water bottle, then at the cuff of his jacket around her wrist, then out into a neighborhood where porch lights glowed warm and close and ordinary. For the first time in longer than she wanted to measure, she felt herself arriving somewhere before she knew the address. Isaiah turned onto a narrower street lined with tired brick buildings and patchy winter grass pressed flat by old snow. The neighborhood was quiet in the way working neighborhoods often were after midnight, not empty, just resting. A porch television glowed blue behind one curtain. Somewhere a dog barked once, then thought better of it. He pulled into a small lot behind a 3-story walk-up with chipped yellow lines and a dumpster tucked beside a chain-link fence. Nothing about the place pretended to be more than it was. Claire found herself grateful for that. Isaiah shut off the truck and sat for a second, listening. Claire noticed it immediately. "What is it?" she asked softly. "Just checking which kind of quiet this is," he said. Then he smiled a little and opened the door. "The good kind." He came around to her side again. Not because she needed help stepping down, but because he was the sort of man who still believed arrival should be acknowledged. Claire climbed out. his jacket still around her shoulders, and looked up at the building. 3 floors. White paint long surrendered to weather. A narrow staircase with black iron rails polished bright in the center from years of use. One potted plant near the door, half alive, half stubborn. "This is home?" she asked before she could stop herself. Isaiah glanced up too. On the day's rent clears, yes. There was no bitterness in it, just fact. He led her up the stairs with the easy caution of someone who knew exactly which step complained louder than the others. At the second-floor landing, a door across the hall opened before he could knock. Mrs. Alvarez stood there in a pink robe and house slippers, silver hair braided down her back. Reading glasses still perched low on her nose like sleep had not fully convinced her to let go of the evening. She took one look at Isaiah, then at Claire in his jacket, and one eyebrow rose with enough wisdom to count as a full paragraph. "You are late," she said. "I know," Isaiah replied. Gate repair ran long. Her gaze slid back to Claire, not hostile, just precise. "And this?" Claire should have hated the question. Most nights she would have. Tonight it felt almost tender that somebody here had permission to ask. Isaiah answered before Claire had to. "This is Claire." She needed somewhere quiet for an hour. Mrs. Alvarez studied her for one heartbeat longer, then nodded like she had checked something invisible and found it acceptable. "Maya is asleep," she said, "after asking 3 times if your bus swallowed you." Isaiah winced. "I owe her pancakes." "You owe me a new cabinet hinge," Mrs. Alvarez corrected, then stepped back enough to reveal a foil-covered plate on the little hallway table behind her. "I left soup. Because a man cannot rescue strangers on an empty stomach." Claire looked down so she would not laugh in front of them and somehow break the fragile warmth of the moment. Isaiah took the plate with one hand and touched his chest with the other. "You are the reason civilization survives," he told her. "I know," Mrs. Alvarez said dryly. Then she looked at Claire again, softer now. "There are clean towels in the basket by his door if you need one, honey." Claire blinked. Honey. Nobody had called her that in years without wanting something after it. "Thank you," she said quietly. Mrs. Alvarez nodded once and disappeared back into her apartment with the finality of a woman who had decided kindness was best delivered briskly. Isaiah unlocked his door and stepped aside. "It is small," he said, "but it is honest." Claire crossed the threshold and stopped. The apartment was not beautiful in the way magazines meant. It was beautiful in the way evidence is beautiful. A lamp with a warm yellow shade glowed from the corner beside a worn gray couch. Children's books were stacked under a coffee table with one uneven leg. A red backpack leaned against the wall near the door with a spelling list clipped to the front pocket. The refrigerator was crowded with school drawings, appointment reminders, and one crooked magnet shaped like the state of Pennsylvania. In the sink sat a rinsed cereal bowl and a tiny spoon. The place smelled faintly of lavender detergent, tomato soup, and something baked earlier in the week. Life. Claire stood there as if she had opened the wrong door and wandered into something sacred by accident. Isaiah set the foil-covered plate on the counter and lowered his voice instinctively. "Maya is in the bedroom. I will not wake her unless I have to." Claire nodded but did not move. Her eyes had landed on a sheet of printer paper taped beside the thermostat in big childlike letters. "Things we do in this house. Say the truth. Wash your hands. Finish homework. Apologize right. Pray if you want to. Laugh loud." Claire read the list once, then again, and something in her face changed so quietly even she might not have noticed it. A penthouse could hold 8 people and still feel empty. This place barely had room for silence. Isaiah moved through the apartment with the quiet efficiency of a man who had learned long ago that peace inside a home was something you protected with your hands. He turned on the small light above the stove instead of the brighter overhead one, setting the room in a softer glow. Then he opened a cabinet, took down a plain glass, and filled it with water before placing it on the coffee table within Claire's reach. No speech, no performance, just care arranged neatly enough not to embarrass the person receiving it. "You can sit," he said, keeping his voice low. "I will heat the soup. It is too late for pride and too cold for shock." Claire looked at him, then at the couch, then finally sat with a care that belonged more to uncertainty than exhaustion. The cushion dipped beneath her and released the faint scent of clean fabric and something sweet, maybe syrup from some earlier breakfast, maybe childhood lingering in the seams. Isaiah took The foil off the plate Mrs. Alvarez had handed him and poured the soup into a small pot. The apartment filled slowly with the smell of chicken broth, garlic, and onions softened long ago by patience. Claire had attended dinners where one appetizer cost more than this entire kitchen table. None of them had ever made her feel less alone. She watched Isaiah as he moved around the narrow space. There was nothing rushed about him, but nothing idle either. He rinsed a spoon while the soup warmed, folded a dish towel that was already folded, straightened a stack of mail near the fruit bowl. Small motions. A life held together not by abundance, but by repetition and care. On the far wall, above a bookshelf missing one handle, hung a framed photo of a little girl in a bright yellow raincoat sitting on Isaiah's shoulders in what looked like a public park after summer rain. Maya's smile took up half the frame. Isaiah's did not. His smile in the picture was smaller, quieter, but it looked like home. Claire kept her eyes on it a second too long. She looks happy, she said. Isaiah glanced at the photo, and something in his face changed. Not softness exactly. More like gravity turning kind. She takes the job seriously, he said. What job? Being 8. Claire let that settle over her. Is it just you and her? Isaiah lowered the heat under the soup. For a while now. He did not offer more, and Claire could hear in that answer the shape of a story that had earned its privacy. She respected him more for not unfolding it in front of her just because the room was late and quiet. He brought the bowl over a minute later and set it on a coaster decorated with cartoon stars. Careful, he said. Mrs. Alvarez cooks like she wants everybody to recover from something. Claire wrapped her hands around the bowl. The warmth moved into her fingers first, then deeper. She had forgotten how much comfort there was in being handed something hot without having to ask for it. She took one sip and closed her eyes before she meant to. The soup was simple. It was also perfect. That good? Isaiah asked from the kitchen, where he was finally pouring the rest into a second bowl for himself. Claire opened her eyes. I do not think I have eaten anything this honest in months. He leaned against the counter, bowl in hand, and gave her the smallest nod, like that answer made sense in a way he had expected it to. Food can tell when it is being made for people or for appearances, he said. Claire looked around again. At the books under the table. At the note taped beside the thermostat. At the little pair of glittery sneakers lined up neatly by the bedroom door. At the absence of polished emptiness. Everything here feels used, she said quietly, then winced. I did not mean that badly. Isaiah did not seem offended. I know what you meant. He looked around his apartment too. Used means lived in. Lived in means somebody is being loved here, or at least remembered. The sentence landed so gently it left a bruise. Claire lowered her spoon. In the penthouse uptown, every room was perfect. Every surface gleamed. Every lamp was chosen by a designer with good taste and no idea what loneliness sounded like after midnight. Here one corner of the rug had curled up from age, and the bookshelf leaned half an inch to the left, and there was a child's jacket hanging off the back of a chair like the room had been interrupted by real life. Claire stared at that little jacket until her throat tightened. I think, she said slowly, I have spent years building a place no one actually lives in. Isaiah did not rush to comfort her. He only looked at her across the small room with the steadiness of a man who did not confuse rescue with interruption. A house can do that, he said. Sometimes it starts holding your image before it ever learns your name. And Claire, sitting on a worn couch in a second-floor apartment she would never have entered on purpose, felt the truth of that more than anything her own walls had ever said back. For a while, neither of them spoke. The soup cooled slowly in Claire's hands, and the apartment settled around them with the soft sounds of a place that had already forgiven the day. A pipe clicked somewhere in the wall. The refrigerator gave a low hum. From behind the closed bedroom door came the faint rustle of a child turning over in sleep, then stillness again. Claire had spent years surrounded by custom silence, the expensive kind built with thick walls and private elevators and windows that did not let the city sound too human. This was different. This silence breathed. Isaiah rinsed his bowl at the sink and dried it right away, because that was clearly the kind of man he was. He did not leave small things for tomorrow if he could spare tomorrow the weight. Claire watched him wipe the counter in one slow pass, then fold the dish towel over the faucet with absent precision. Do you always do that? She asked. He glanced back. Do what? Make everything look easier than it is. Isaiah leaned one shoulder against the sink and considered the question as if it deserved a truthful answer. No, he said. I just try not to make hard things louder. Claire looked down at the soup again. Somewhere in another life, in another room, that sentence would have sounded like a line. Here it sounded like a habit. That must be nice for Maya, she said. Having someone like that in the house. Isaiah's eyes moved briefly toward the bedroom door. I hope so. Then, after a beat, kids hear more than adults think. Fear gets into the walls if you let it. Claire felt that one in her ribs. She had built an empire by staying composed in rooms where everybody else was trying to win. She knew how to flatten a panic before it reached her voice. She knew how to carry bad news in good shoes. But nobody had ever spoken of fear as something that could live in a house and learn its corners. That language belonged to somebody who had paid close attention to what safety actually felt like. And what if it is already there? She asked quietly. Isaiah did not answer right away. He took the dish towel from the faucet, folded it once more, then set it down. Then you give people something gentler to hear every day until the walls learn a new sound. Claire looked up at him. It was not advice exactly. It was too lived in for that. More like a fact he had earned. Her gaze drifted again to the paper list beside the thermostat. Say the truth. Wash your hands. Finish homework. Apologize right. Pray if you want to. Laugh loud. She stood slowly and crossed the room as if drawn there. Up close, she could see that the letters changed size halfway down, like Maya had started helping write the list or maybe insisted on contributing. Who made this? She asked. I wrote the first 3, Isaiah said. Maya added the rest, especially the laugh loud part. She believes rules should be reasonable. Claire touched the edge of the paper lightly, careful not to pull the tape loose. My house has a wine room, she said after a moment, and a screening room, and a dining table that seats 14 people. Isaiah stayed quiet. She turned toward him, her expression softer now, but somehow more exposed. I do not think anybody has ever laughed loudly there. The words hung between them. No drama. No breakdown. Just the clean ache of something finally said correctly. Isaiah met her gaze, and his own did not carry pity. Thank God for that. Pity would have ruined it. Big rooms can be lonely on purpose, he said. They give people somewhere to hide from each other and call it comfort. Claire let out a breath she had not known she was holding. She moved back to the couch and sat again, not like a guest this time, more like a woman too tired to perform being one. Her eyes fell on the small bookshelf beside the lamp. Along the top shelf were children's books, spelling cards, and a jar full of sharpened pencils. On the lower shelf sat 3 library books, a grocery envelope folded into a bookmark, and a framed certificate from Maya's elementary school for perfect attendance. Beside it, half tucked behind a stack of paperbacks, was another frame. Smaller, turned at an angle. Claire could only make out the edge of a graduation photo and the corner of a nameplate beneath it. You went to college, she said, not looking away from the shelf. Isaiah's posture changed by less than an inch, but it changed. A couple years, he said. Engineering track. Life moved faster than tuition did. Claire turned toward him then, her business-trained mind catching the understatement immediately. You left? I paused, he said with a faint smile. Then the pause got comfortable. There was no shame in his tone. That struck her too. Most people talked about what they had lost with either bitterness or performance. Isaiah spoke like a man who had made peace with detours, but never confused them with destiny. And now, she asked. He looked around the apartment once, at the couch, the little backpack, the closed bedroom door. Now I fix what breaks, pay rent 30 days at a time, and make sure my daughter thinks the world is still worth trusting. Claire stared at him. In her world, people introduced themselves with titles, valuations, resumes polished until they gleamed. Here was a man standing barefoot on old linoleum, saying the truest thing she had heard in years as if it were no larger than a grocery list. Something in her face must have given way then, because Isaiah's voice gentled another degree. You should try to sleep for a little while, he said. You do not have to decide anything tonight. Claire looked at the lamp, the couch, the folded throw blanket waiting over the armrest like someone here had already thought ahead for comfort. Then she looked back at him and realized he was right. Not about sleep. About the other thing. For the first time in a long time, she did not need to decide who she was before morning. She only needed to rest where no one was asking her to be impressive. Claire did sleep, though she would not have believed it possible an hour earlier. Not deeply, not for long, but enough for the sharp edges inside her to loosen. She woke sometime before dawn under a soft knitted throw that smelled faintly of lavender and clean cotton. The lamp in the corner now turned off, the apartment washed in that quiet blue light that belongs only to early morning. For a second, she did not know where she was. Then she heard it. A low voice from the kitchen. A child's whisper answering back. The delicate clink of a spoon against a bowl. She pushed herself upright slowly, careful not to disturb the blanket slipping from her shoulder. Her heels were lined up neatly by the door. Her phone sat charging on the end table beside a folded note written in steady block letters on the back of a grocery receipt. Coffee is fresh. Do not let Maya talk you into too much syrup. Claire stared at the note longer than she meant to. Then she stood and followed the soft voices toward the kitchen. Isaiah was at the stove in a gray t-shirt and dark sweatpants, one hand flipping pancakes with the same calm competence he seemed to bring to everything, the other reaching automatically to steady a plastic cup near the counter before it tipped. Maya sat on a stool at the tiny table in mismatched socks, her hair gathered into a lopsided puff, carefully arranging strawberry slices into what looked like a smiling face on top of a pancake. The morning light made the room look even smaller than it had at night, but warmer too. The kind of warm that comes less from square footage than from routine. Maya looked up first. Her eyes widened, not with fear, just surprise. "Oh," she said, blinking at Claire with frank 8-year-old curiosity. "You are the tired lady." Isaiah turned, and for one brief second Claire saw something close to embarrassment cross his face. "Maya," he said gently, "we are aiming for kind and accurate, not just accurate." Maya considered that, then nodded solemnly. "Sorry. Good morning." Claire, to her own surprise, smiled. "Good morning," she said. "And yes, I think that was me." Maya accepted this with the ease children reserve for truths adults spend years avoiding. "Do you like pancakes?" she asked immediately. "Because my dad makes them like he is trying to win a contest nobody else signed up for." Isaiah shook his head under his breath, but Claire caught the faint smile tugging at the edge of his mouth. "I like pancakes," Claire said. "Then sit," Maya declared, as if she had just solved something important. "There is a chair that does not wobble if you do not lean left." Claire took the offered seat. The table was small enough that her knees nearly brushed the opposite chair, small enough that every item on it seemed to matter. Syrup, butter, a chipped blue mug, a napkin holder decorated with crayon stars. The coffee Isaiah poured into her cup was plain and hot, and far better than anything from the polish machine in her own kitchen upstairs in the sky. "You did not have to charge my phone," she said quietly as he set the mug in front of her. "You look like somebody who might have people panic by breakfast," he replied. Claire let out the slightest laugh. "That is unfortunately true." Maya looked between them. "Are you famous?" she asked. Isaiah closed his eyes for half. A second in patient surrender. "Baby." "What?" Maya said. "If somebody has panic people, they are probably at least a little famous." Claire wrapped both hands around the coffee mug, letting its heat steady her before she answered. "I am not the fun kind," she said. Maya seemed to weigh that. "That is okay," she decided. "My dad is not the fun kind either before coffee." "I am sitting right here," Isaiah said, sliding a plate toward her. "And yet," Maya replied, reaching for the syrup with philosophical calm. Claire looked down so her smile could happen in private first. The pancake on her plate was not perfect. One side browned a little too much at the edge. The center was uneven. It looked nothing like the styled brunch photos her assistants sometimes sent during meetings from places where nobody actually seemed hungry. She cut into it anyway, took one bite, and felt something inside her go still. Not because it was extraordinary, because it was not. It was simple, warm, made for the people in the room. Maya was now telling her, in breathless detail, about a class guinea pig named Franklin who had escaped twice and somehow returned smarter both times. Isaiah corrected her gently on the word somehow. Maya ignored him with affection. Claire listened, and as she did, she became aware of a strange and painful truth. No one here was trying to impress her. No one here cared what her last name opened. No one here was measuring the room according to her rank. They were simply making breakfast and letting her exist near it. That, more than the food or the warmth or the smallness of the kitchen, was what nearly undid her. Because somewhere along the way, Claire Whitmore had built a life where every chair at her table came with an agenda. And now an 8-year-old in mismatched socks was offering her syrup like it was the most natural kindness in the world. After breakfast, The room changed shape in small ways. Isaiah rinsed plates while Maya hunted for her left sneaker under the couch and announced, with the urgency only children can give ordinary disasters, that school absolutely could not happen unless someone found her purple folder with the cat sticker on it. Claire stood near the counter with her coffee cup in both hands, watching the morning unfold around her. With the strange stillness of someone standing inside a life she had not known she missed. Nothing here was polished. Nothing was optimized. And yet every movement seemed to belong to something larger than efficiency. Isaiah checked a lunchbox, signed a reading log, found the missing folder beneath a stack of library books, and listened to Maya explain, for the third time, why Franklin the class guinea pig deserved a better desk location. He never once told her to hurry in the sharp, distracted way Claire was used to hearing from adults with full calendars. He simply kept the morning moving without making it feel chased. Shoes, he reminded gently. Backpack. Got it. Spelling quiz today. I know. Kind voice with Miss Turner. Maya sighed as if burdened by unreasonable governance. I always have a kind voice. Isaiah looked at Claire for half a second, and Claire, before she could stop herself, said, that did not sound entirely convincing. Maya stared at her, then broke into a grin so sudden it changed the whole kitchen. You can stay, she declared. Isaiah shook his head, smiling despite himself. That is not your call. But Claire felt the words anyway. You can stay. 3 of the most ordinary words in the world. 3 words that still managed to find the hollow place in her chest. A little later, after Maya had been zipped into her coat and sent downstairs to wait with Mrs. Alvarez for the school bus, the apartment fell quiet again. Not empty, just thinner now, as if the child-shaped center of it had stepped outside for a moment and left warmth behind. Isaiah wiped the table one last time and reached for his keys. I should walk her down, he said. Then he paused. There is more coffee if you want it. Claire nodded, though what she really wanted was more time inside whatever this was. He left for only a few minutes. Long enough for Claire to drift toward the bookshelf again. In daylight, she could see more clearly now. The smaller frame she had noticed the night before held a faded photo of a much younger Isaiah in a community college sweatshirt, standing beside an older woman with tired, kind eyes and a proud smile. Next to it sat a plastic trophy shaped like a pencil, probably Maya's, and a folded bill tucked under a magnet on the side of the shelf as if money here had places to be the minute it arrived. Claire did not snoop further. She did not need to. The apartment had already told her what mattered. When Isaiah came back in, cold air trailing briefly behind him, Claire turned from the shelf and reached automatically for her handbag. I should leave something, she said. The sentence came out before she could soften it. Isaiah stopped in the middle of the room. Leave what? For the food. For your time. For last night. She pulled out her wallet, already wincing at herself, already hearing how it sounded. She took out a few crisp bills anyway. Not because she thought he needed charity. Because in her world, gratitude was almost always translated into money before it could become vulnerable enough to look like anything else. Isaiah looked at the bills in her hand, then at her face. He did not seem angry. That almost made it worse. Claire, he said quietly, put that away. She swallowed. I am not trying to insult you. I know. His voice stayed calm. That is why I am asking nicely. She lowered her hand, but did not put the money back yet. Then let me do something, she said. People do not just open their homes to me for nothing. Isaiah set his keys on the counter and took one step closer, not enough to crowd her, just enough to make sure the truth reached before her defenses did. That sounds lonely, he said. Claire looked up sharply. He had not raised his voice, had not made a speech. But there it was. A clean, quiet sentence placed exactly where it hurt. She stared at him, and for a second her expression lost all polish. It is practical, she said, but even she could hear how thin that sounded. Isaiah shook his head once. No, it is expensive. Different thing. The room went still. Claire slowly slid the bills back into her wallet. Her throat felt tight in a way she could not fix with posture. You really do not want anything from me, she said. It was not a question. Isaiah picked up his keys again. Everybody wants something, he said. I just do not want the thing you are used to giving. Claire held his gaze. Then what do you want? He thought about that. Longer than most people in her orbit ever thought about anything before answering. For Maya to keep growing up in a world where helping somebody does not need paperwork after it. Claire looked away first. Out the window, The school bus was pulling off at the end of the block, yellow against the gray morning. Somewhere downstairs, Mrs. Alvarez was laughing at something too loudly to be elegant. The sound rose through the building like proof. Claire stood there in a kitchen barely wide enough for two people to pass comfortably and realized that this man, with his plain coffee and worn counters and impossible steadiness, had just refused the one language her entire adult life had taught her to speak. And instead of offending her, it made her feel seen in a way that money never once had. Claire left 10 minutes later with her phone charged, her coat back on, and Isaiah's jacket folded carefully over her arm until he insisted she keep it for the walk downstairs because the morning had sharpened while they talked. She stepped out into the street carrying none of the things she usually relied on to feel in control. No script. No polished explanation for why she had vanished overnight. No shield against the fact that a two-bedroom apartment above a woman named Mrs. Alvarez had unsettled her more deeply than any board fight ever had. Isaiah walked her to her car in the same quiet way he had led her in the night before, not possessive, not distant, just present. The neighborhood was fully awake now. A mail truck rolled past. Somebody down the block was sweeping a stoop. Two boys in oversized backpacks argued about whose turn it was to carry a science project made from a shoebox and too much glitter. Claire looked around as if the block itself had been speaking to her all along, and she had only just learned how to listen. When they reached her Mercedes, Isaiah handed her the jacket. She took it, but did not give it back right away. "You were right," she said. He waited. "About what?" "About my house." The words felt strange in daylight, less dramatic and more true. "It is loud in all the wrong ways." Isaiah slid his hands into his pockets against the cold. "Most people build places for status first," he said. "Then they wonder why peace feels like a guest." Claire looked down at the jacket in her hands. The fabric was worn smooth at the cuffs. One seam near the pocket had been repaired with thread a shade darker than the original, neat enough to show care, visible enough to show truth. "I do not want to go back there tonight either," she said, before she had fully decided to say it. Isaiah's expression shifted, not with surprise exactly, more with caution. He knew the difference between a confession and a decision. "Then do not make tonight's plans while you are still standing in this morning," he said. Claire gave a small, tired smile. There it was again. The way he refused to let urgency pretend to be wisdom. She opened the car door, then stopped with one hand on the frame. In the glass, she caught her reflection beside his. Her tailored coat. His faded work shirt. Her city-polished life. His ordinary steadiness. The contrast should have made the moment ridiculous. Instead it made it honest. Claire turned back to him. "I have a guest house," she said. Isaiah did not speak. "On the property. Separate entrance. 2 bedrooms. A backyard I do not use. A swing set that came with the place because the previous owners had children." She heard how strange she sounded and almost laughed at herself, but the laugh never came. "I keep gardeners for grass no one runs through." Isaiah's gaze stayed on her face, calm and unreadable. "Claire." She swallowed. "I am not saying this well." "Then say it slowly." The street around them seemed to hush, or maybe she just stopped hearing anything beyond the risk of her own voice. Claire tightened her grip on the jacket and forced herself not to retreat into polished language. "Come stay there," she said. "You and Maya. For a while. Not as charity. Not because I think you need saving." Her breath caught, but she kept going. I do not think that house should stay empty anymore. And I do not think Maya should have to grow up measuring sunshine in apartment windows if I have a yard sitting useless behind iron gates." Isaiah did not move. The silence that followed was not cold. It was careful. Claire rushed on anyway, because once a truth finally got loose inside her, it seemed to want the rest. Of itself. "You can say no. You probably should. I know how this sounds. But last night was the first time in years my life did not feel like a building I had to maintain alone. This morning was the first breakfast I have had at a table where nobody needed anything from me. And I went home in my head for 10 seconds just now and realized I cannot walk back into all that glass and pretend it still makes sense." Her voice thinned on the last words. She hated that. Hated how exposed she sounded. Hated more that she could not stop. "I am not asking for gratitude," she said. "I think I am asking for company. Real company. The kind that leaves shoes by the door and syrup on the table and maybe laughter in rooms built for the wrong things." Isaiah looked down once, then back at her. The morning light touched the tired edges of his face and made him look both younger and older somehow, like a man holding two lives at once. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet enough that she had to lean into the moment to hear it. "I will not let my daughter grow up feeling like we were rescued by your money." Claire's face fell before she could stop it. But then he stepped closer by half a pace and continued, still gentle, still steady. "But if you are asking for a family to help make a house feel human, that is a different thing." Claire blinked. The cold air stung suddenly. Or maybe that was not the air. Isaiah's eyes did not leave hers. "Maya and I have lived in small places before," he said. "We know how to carry ourselves anywhere. What I need to know is whether you want us there as guests, or as proof that you are not lonely." Claire's breath caught hard enough to hurt. There it was. The clean cut of truth again. No cruelty in it. Just mercy sharp enough to matter. She opened her mouth, closed it, then answered with more honesty than she had given anyone in years. "Both," she whispered. "At first, maybe both. But I think I want to learn the first one better." For a second Isaiah said nothing. Then his expression softened in a way that seemed to come from somewhere old and deeply guarded. "That," he said, "is the first honest invitation you have probably ever made." Claire let out one broken laugh that turned, to her horror, into tears almost immediately. Not dramatic tears. Not the pretty kind. Just sudden, quiet ones that arrived when a person had been standing too long inside herself, and somebody finally opened a window. She looked away and pressed the heel of her hand beneath one eye, embarrassed. Isaiah did not mention it. Did not move to touch her. Did not rescue her from her own face. He only stood there in the cold morning, giving her dignity even now. And somehow that made the tears come harder. Because all her life, people had bowed to her power, chased her approval, feared her silence, admired her control. This man had done none of those things. He had simply answered her with enough truth to make her feel human again.